You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous. Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
Born wild. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sophia. And today I have with me Madison. And I'll just hand it right over to you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah, it's nice to be here. My name is Madison Desjarlais, and I am attending births in the lower mainland area of British Columbia, Canada. And I've been doing this now almost a decade, and it has been a wild journey.
A decade,
yeah.
That's a milestone when that happens.
Yeah, and just as the culture of birth has shifted, I feel like I've shifted also. And so the way that I work it looks a lot different than when it did almost 10 years ago. And so, yeah.
How did that start for you? How did you even know that this was what you wanted to do?
I get that question a lot, especially because I am really young. So I'm 27 years old, and I started this work fresh out of high school. I felt really called to work with pregnant people and women and families, but I didn't necessarily know in what field. So I knew that pregnant people, they go and they get ultrasounds, right? So I thought maybe being an ultrasound technician was the path for me. And then I learned that you're kind of stuck in a dark room for 8 hours a day, every day. And that didn't seem too appealing to me. So I shifted into doula work, and I got my first doula certification and went through that training. And within the first year of getting that certification, I was attending births, and predominantly hospital births. And I never really, in the first year, I didn't see too much of what I thought would be obstetrical violence until I would say the third year into working as a birth keeper and a doula. I started to not feel so good about what I was witnessing, especially because I was developing these really beautiful connections and relationships with my clients. And then I was seeing their dreams just be completely sabotaged by the cascade of interventions. And I just remember calling my mom after every birth I attended, and I would just say to her, there's something missing here. This isn't right.
Did you know your mother's birth stories or any other women in your family, to know, oh, this is kind of what everyone's story seems to be like, or that there is something different?
So my mother was born, my grandmother, all of her births were through the Twilight era, Twilight birthing era. And I remember
for people who don't know what that is, can you explain it?
Well, yeah. So I guess the exact timeline, it would be through the 40s and 50s, or even into the 60s. Medical obstetrics was kind of on the rise, and birth was brought into the hospital, and women were strapped to the hospital bed in gurneys, and they were administered chloroform as a sedative. But oftentimes women would just fall asleep and become unconscious, and then the baby would be medically extracted either via cesarean or with the first forceps that were sort of coming into the obstetrical realms. So women were left pretty much abused and maimed, and just they would wake up and their baby would be in a nursery, and they were scheduled feedings. So yeah, very systematic. And then after that, they stopped using the chloroform and allowed women to be more present in the in the experience, but then the use of Pitocin started to come in, and pain management was available in different forms, like morphine, and the nitrous oxide, I believe, was still around, was just starting to come around. Yeah, but my mom, when she was birthing my brother and I, she was very present. She had no pain management. She did not have an epidural. It was with our family doctor. It was very quiet. It was very laid back, although it wasn't a hospital. But yeah, the birthing video of myself was just very gentle and peaceful. And she used water as pain management and just let her body take over. And I was birthed really quickly, just in about 6 hours. So that's my story. Anyways.
Yeah. It's amazing what a couple decades will do to a culture.
Exactly. And then so I started to see, like, right, so going back to birth, attending birth in the hospitals, and just calling my mom and her saying, well, maybe there is a different way. Saying what you're seeing here, if it doesn't feel good in your heart, then I wonder if there's different ways of birth that you can explore. And I had heard of Gloria LeMay, who is a traditional birth attendant in this area, in my local area. And I had heard of Jessica Austin, who was a renowned birth doula in the area as well, who has now passed on. Gloria is still with us, but Jessica, yeah, she is a beautiful mentor for so many of us here in Vancouver, Canada. But I'd heard of them, and I'd heard of their training. And as soon as I took their training with Jessica and Gloria, my eyes were just so bright and my heart was lit up, because they were talking about physiological birth and teaching us on the beauty and the joys of physiological birth and how healing it can be for mothers and for families and for babies. And since their course in 2015, I've just been, I have this passion for physiological birth and free birth. And yeah, so then through the pandemic, I think the whole world got rocked. And people wanted different options. There was a lot of mistrust.
Yeah, what was the shift that you saw there? Whereas before, this was kind of the clientele and what they wanted, versus during the pandemic versus after. Can we call it after yet? Are we after? I don't even know where we are.
I feel like we're out of it at this point, but now we're just dealing with the trauma of all of what we've been through.
Yeah.
Which could take some time. But yeah, I mean, the silver lining of the pandemic for myself personally and for my business was that women were not really trusting the system, and they weren't sure about birthing their babies in a system that seemed very fear-based and seemed unsafe. A lot of families that I started working with were, more holistic and wanted to be connected with nature. And they saw birth as a ceremony. And so they were sharing these thoughts with me and feelings. And I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't really sound like the hospital space is really conducive for what it is that you're trying to manifest. And so how are your thoughts around home birth? And a lot of people thought that it's like illegal.
Oh, interesting.
Like home birth is like, it's not allowed. It's too unsafe. What about the emergency situations? And who can attend my birth and ensure that everybody is safe and healthy? So then I started educating my clients around registered midwifery. And in the beginning of the pandemic, that seemed to be a good option for families. And then I was really showing how registered midwifery is really just an extension of the medical obstetric complex. And they still have certain procedures and protocols that they have to do in order to stay licensed. And a lot of those procedures and protocols, including like the vaccine conversations, wasn't just didn't feel good for a lot of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I was attending births alongside registered midwives in the homes of my clients and families. And then what started happening was the registered midwives were just not even showing up, coming to the births. Yeah, there was one specific midwifery group in my hometown that there was like a bait and switch going on. So they would say, well, yeah, we do homework, no problem. But then in the throes of labor and while you're in the birthing space, they would kind of coerce you to go to the hospital.
What?
For whatever reason. Like they would just, oh, her waters are open or whatever, right?
Like it became obvious that that was the plan all along.
Yeah.
And are you thinking because they were worried about COVID? Like it was specific about COVID?
Definitely. I feel like they were under a lot of pressure and they were being told that it's safer for all of us to be in a sterile environment, in a hospital where we can control the situation, especially if my clients had a history of contracting COVID throughout their pregnancy. They really wanted to monitor those women at the hospital.
Mm-hmm. And so could these midwives continue care at the hospital, or they were then a doula role, or probably not even going in at all?
Yeah, they wouldn't show up to the house, and so, but they would be there at the hospital.
They would just be like, come meet me here.
They'd be like, yes, okay, so it'd be great if, you know, you can come to the hospital. We're here and we're waiting for you.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So that was extremely frustrating. And I, again, was just so let down by the medical system and like how they weren't showing up for my clients in the way that they said they would be. And that's when it just, my clients were strong and empowered. And we had a lot of conversations in the antenatal period around the safety of home birth and physiological birth and how to trust the body and trust the ways of birth. And so a few of my clients in this situation, they wouldn't even go. They'd say, okay, well, screw these midwives. I'm just going to stay home. Will you stay with me? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, of course I will stay. Like, we're not going anywhere until, you know, your baby's here and
support you can through your midwifery abandonment.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So that gave me the confidence to really step into the role of a traditional birth attendant, an authentic midwife. And, you know, it really confirmed to me that this was a destiny and a good path and a safe path, especially if these are the clients that I'm attracting and the women that are asking me to be in their birth space, then it's, you know, it's important for me to step into this role. Yeah. So
can you, if anything, has your role when you were a doula with midwives attending births at home to being a birth keeper and, you know, authentic midwife, has your role physically changed at all? Like, are you doing more or less different type of support for these families?
It really hasn't, like physically, yeah. And what I'm offering really hasn't shifted, you know. I am still playing the gatekeeper, holding the sacred space. I don't offer any sort of clinical intervention because I'm not trained in that way, nor do I have a license to do these things, right? Like checking fetal heart tones or doing cervical exams or administering medication, right? That's not what I'm here for. And that's often not what my clients want anyways, especially now. So here we are in 2023 where women have, you know, Instagram, or they have access to these podcasts where they're learning about the detrimental effects of all these interventions or how they can really interfere with the physiological process. And so, yeah, it feels good to be able to continue on. Although every birth I learn something new, right? Because every birth is so unique.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I stay away from the the clinical side of, I don't believe birth is a pathology, right? Unless if the woman is telling me that something's wrong and we have to go and we have to transfer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Have you been to births where there was something that you felt like you wish you could have been able to do if you had been licensed?
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes families will say, I just want to listen to my baby's heartbeat. Like, I just want to hear if they're okay. And one thing that they are able to do is listen for themselves. And so to have their own Doppler and to learn how to use it in pregnancy. And then if they feel, if they're in a moment of fear in birth, then they can use their own Doppler on themselves, or just trying to encourage like the families to be empowered and to take action if they're in a place of fear. And the same would go for doing their own vaginal exams. Like, okay, if you're feeling pressure down in your rectum or in your perineum, like, I wonder if that's your baby's head. Why don't you feel for yourself? And so really just, if there's a moment of uncertainty, I always try and ask my clients, how can they become more empowered in that moment by taking full sovereignty and stepping into their own bodily autonomy. I do sometimes wish I could see the baby like through her belly to see if it's to see if it's some sort of like malposition, and that's why it's taking so long.
Uh-huh.
I do wish that, I could have like X-ray goggles or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even just like a scan her and be like, okay, this is what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
But that's one of the things about, like, I try to remind myself is sitting in the mystery with them, and that's the biggest lesson that all births teach us, is just the mystery. And as soon as you think you know how it's going to go, it's not going to go that way. And yeah.
You're right. It is so unpredictable, and
prepares you for parenthood, that's the greatest hardship and mystery of them all, is how is this going to go, and if you try to control every aspect of one, is that what's going to happen for the next? Because kids are resistant, and you're going to butt heads.
Absolutely. Yeah, kids and our children being our greatest teachers.
Yeah.
And I do really feel like the children that are coming onto the planet now are all the more resilient and are really testing families and testing women, and are really wanting us to step into more of our sovereignty and to not let, yeah. So that's a whole nother conversation though.
Yeah. I know we had spoke earlier about like what we wanted to talk about here, and it was like really about the trauma and power piece. Is that something that you have like incorporate into your birthkeeper work, like helping families
Absolutely.
process?
Yeah. So, I mean, especially for a second birth or third birth, a lot of families do, like, they will come to me and say, my first experience in the hospital or with registered midwives wasn't what I had expected. I was left feeling broken. I was left feeling like I my body wasn't able to birth a baby naturally. And so I'm really nervous about trying for a home birth after cesarean, or I'm really nervous about how this one's going to go, because they wholeheartedly believe that their body failed them through the experience, or their baby wasn't healthy enough to make it safely through the passage of birth. And so there is a lot of demystifying and going through the cascade of interventions to help them understand, well, you were given a medication that is not natural and it's synthetic and it's extremely intense, with that being Pitocin, that fake oxytocin. And so, of course, you chose to get an epidural. Of course, like you were probably suffering through those feelings. And you probably didn't know that you could turn down the Pitocin and even turn it off and see if your body would continue without the medication, right? And so, And then once you're
Sometimes I
given
feel
them,
like people don't need doulas in the hospital. They need lawyers, to like let them know what their rights are.
it's so true. But then also at the same time, like that can be so overwhelming, like having to, this is what I'm sort of learning now is like, well, this is a lot of work prenatally to like safeguard them and protect them and overwhelm them with this information, so that they can enter the birth space well equipped, right, and well prepared, and then
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, like
and
that.
then
I'm
yeah.
just going to speak out loud what I need, and then you can speak to my lawyer.
Exactly. Right. And that would actually be way better, right? Like you're right, maybe I should just go into law and then. But it's funny though, because like the obstetricians and the registered midwives, like they're just thinking about litigation the whole time, right? And that's what I tell my clients is they're really just thinking about how they can save their butt in court if things were to go awry, because they are giving you all these drugs and they're so liable, right? And usually after those conversations, they fall into a place of like, oh well, this wasn't my fault, this was totally out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
And the layers of trauma and grief start to peel back, and then we talk about physiological birth and undisturbed birth, and how it can feel so empowering for you to just allow to, be in this liminal space, be in this mystery, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, and I think too there are like women in two different categories. Either one where their first birth was traumatic, they're planning their next one, they really want to feel powerful in this one, and so they work their way through their pregnancy towards this goal. And then also there are women who are done and their births were traumatic and they're never going to have, potentially a redemptive, as some call it, birth experience. And how that processing is probably very different for somebody who's not going to like do it again.
Yeah, exactly. And they are so strong about their decision, and they feel so they're already empowered through their pregnancy, because they know that their birth was so messed up in the system that they want a different way for this next birth. But to also recognize that for the women who had a traumatic birth in the system, they were only doing what they could do with given the information they were provided with at the time. But then also, if they were in a space of trying with that pregnancy, that first pregnancy, if they were trying to manifest a more natural birth or a holistic way of birth, that intention was felt by the baby, right? And so even like those radical thoughts, like those radical feelings, and like wanting a physiological home birth or wanting a natural birth, I don't even think mothers 20 years ago were thinking about that, or mothers 30, 40 years even had that in mind, right? It just wasn't even an option. And so that mindset and those intentions and those feelings, that's passed down onto the child. And so already there's been a shift in the culture, and there's been, new downloads available for our kids. And so even if you did up with cesarean or ended with some sort of traumatic birth experience, it's like, well, at least you tried to have this divine experience. It was within your field, but you just weren't fully supported and you weren't in the right environment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Do you have any advice for people who are maybe, for whatever reason, going into the system and will be birthing at a hospital, and maybe they will not be able to have a doula advocate for them, and that will be their responsibility or their partner's responsibility? Are there any general tips and advice that you have for families to know what their rights are?
Yeah, I feel as though even if they can't have a doula with them in the space, to be the ones advocating for themselves and to know all of the benefits and the risk of every intervention that's going to be presented to them in the birth space, and to know what their choice is beforehand. And in the moment, if that choice shifts, then that's okay. And they make some changes, that's okay. But to just understand that birth is on the maternity ward it's supposed to be they want it to be really fast, and they want it to be very linear, and they're following numbers and procedures and protocols. And if they're wanting to manifest a physiological birth, it's most likely going to be impossible in that environment. And so to, understand all of the interventions is really important. Mm-hmm. So if they can do some sort of prenatal class or speak with a doula beforehand who can help them understand the cascade of interventions. And also, I think it's really interesting. I had this come up with a client recently who he said, okay, so if they're feeling, he wanted to know basically how much obstetricians make from a cesarean section. And he wanted to know how much money the hospital was making with all the interventions that were being presented at birth. And it's available to us online. Mm-hmm. So we spent like our whole prenatal just like counting all the numbers to see how much money the hospital is making from all these different procedures. Mm-hmm. And the total was really shocking to them. And so that was their way of sort of like going into they're still planning a hospital birth, but they know now, like, oh, well, this is why they're wanting to do this intervention, because they're going to make this much money. And that was kind of like their armor and their weapon that they were going to use towards them. She hasn't birthed yet, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, those are, I've heard doulas recommending that people bring their own Tylenol or Tums or, something like that, because they're like, you're going to be charged $200 for a tablet, you might as well bring your own.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I guess I understand people, we're conditioned to believe that the hospital is here to save us in the event of an emergency. And that's why they want to be birthing in that space. But yeah, it's, there's one thing I'll share that Jessica used to always say to her students, and she would say, if you are looking for a physiological birth or a natural birth in the hospital, that's like going to McDonald's and asking for a perfectly cooked triple egg steak. Mm-hmm. It's just like, it's impossible. You can't have it.
Yeah. When I was a doula, I would ask my clients, what do you want from them? Because we spend a lot of time talking about what you don't want, but what do you want seemed to change them, because they were like, oh yeah, what do I actually want from them? For some people are like, nothing. Like, I don't really, and for some people they're like, to monitor the baby and to monitor me. Like they do realize that they want those things. And for some people they're like, I don't want anything. I want to be there in case after I give birth, I bleed a lot, or, something like that. I like to really get them to say what it is that you actually want from them. Yeah.
Beautiful. And that's like,
figure it out. Mm-hmm.
I love that, because that's them like really finding the intention as to why they're there. Like, what's your biggest intention with being in this space and bringing your baby into this environment?
Because if they don't want anything, why are you going? Why are you going?
It's like a huge light bulb moment, and they're like, okay, but then how do we do it the other way? It's like,
because they're going to want to do things, and you need to be able to tell them what you want. And if you don't want anything, then they're going to be like, why did you come if you don't want any of the services we provide? Like, that's silly. Why show up then?
Exactly. And you did bring up a good point. I think for a lot of people, it is about the skills in fetal resuscitation or having the medication if she is to hemorrhage. And then that opens up a door of conversation around, well, if you weren't given any intervention throughout the birth experience, then you're very less likely to need that medication to stop the uterus from bleeding. If you've had a physiological birth experience, there's a good chance you can have that physiological third stage or placenta birth as well. And then that might even make them think about, okay, well, then I guess we don't have to be there after all, right?
Right. To get them to like confess to themselves what it is that they're needing, and to say, like, I'm still choosing to be in this environment where I don't want anything from these people, but they are going to want to provide these services, that they just are admitting that they're going to put
Right.
themselves in a really tough situation, yeah,
To be
and like take
responsible.
responsibility. Yeah, exactly. Take responsibility for that decision, and it's fine, but that you're choosing that, because sometimes there can be this like victim mentality around it, and it's like, no, 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 like make a choice, and it might come with like potentially more financial responsibility too, but either way, you're going to take responsibility one way or another.
Absolutely.
What does midwifery like in Canada financially? Like if people
Registered midwifery, yeah, it is covered by the government. It's covered by MSP, Medical Services Plan in Canada.
Mhm.
And so
Does that mean that parents get reimbursed or they don't have to pay anything?
they don't have to pay anything.
Mhm.
So they have the antenatal care with their midwifery team. There's always a team of midwives who's overseeing the patient's chart.
Mhm.
And then they, well, may or may not be there for the birth.
Mhm.
It depends if they want to show up. Yeah. It's kind of, I think it is easing off now that we're not so under pressure with COVID. I know that there are more registered midwives that are going back into the homes now.
Mhm.
But yeah, and then they're with my clients up to about 6 weeks, and then they close the chart. But if there's any sort of indication of the patient being what they would consider as high risk, and that could just be something very simple, like your blood pressure is a little bit high for a few weeks, then they think about transferring the woman into obstetrical care.
Mhm.
And so it's really easy to fall out of midwifery care and to fall into obstetrical care, where you're then deemed high risk and have to birth. You have to birth at the hospital at that point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unless you choose free birth.
Unless if you choose to walk away, yeah, and just be at home
Yeah.
and free birth your baby.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Is there a large community of birth keepers and authentic midwives in your area?
I would say at this point, no.
Mhm.
I feel I don't feel so alone as I did throughout COVID and 3 years ago and 4 years ago when I started thinking about this work. But it's very slim. It's very slim. I would say there's only 3 traditional birth attendants, including myself, that are open about it and share that this is what they're doing. And there's a lot of women, especially a lot of young doulas, who are aspiring traditional birth attendants.
Mhm.
And so I feel like in the next maybe 5-10 years, it's going to change. Yeah,
Shifting again. We were
it
talking
is.
Twilight Sleep and then your mother's births, and there's another shift going on.
Yeah, it's very evident. And so I facilitate village gatherings in my community where mothers and babies and actually some fathers have been coming to the events now, where there's usually around 6 to 10 couples or women who are, like I said, either pregnant or trying to get pregnant, and they're interested in wild pregnancy and wild birth and free birth and home birth.
Mhm.
And I started these about a year and a half ago, and it's been so fun to get together and have conversations around what birth could look like outside of the hospital.
Mhm.
And we talk about safety, and we talk about the power of home birth, and how it's actually very beneficial for a family and beneficial for a couple and for children. And it's like the optimal birthing environment is at home, in the comforts of your home. And to be able to not feel alone in that choice is really important for families, because you see it online a lot. But then to actually know other families in your community who are also making the same choices and are having the same feelings with their care providers it's really powerful. So
Yeah. I think people can make assumptions too on the type of person that would choose a home birth and that they maybe are just not that person. That it takes a really crunchy, hippie kind of person. And then, yeah, I remember when we had a dad who talked to one of his golf buddies, and turns out that he had had all his children at home and it just like never came up. And he was like, in this way, he was like, someone like me. Someone
exactly. And it's woven in us, like home birth and birth as a ceremony is like it's down the line somewhere. And for many years, like thousands of years, right? So,
Yeah.
it's only just been recent that we've seen birth in the hospitals. And so the tides are definitely turning. And I like to share one thing that one of my clients told me as she was in that beautiful golden hour, that postpartum moment. This was one of my clients who had her midwives abandon her at birth. We were just laying there all in bed, exhausted, and she had a little bit of trickling of bleeding that we were just monitoring. But she was actually checking her own blood pressure. Yeah, and we were just laying there, and then I went back to visit her a few days later, and I said, so how has this experience been for you? How do you feel about your midwives like abandoning you? And she looked at me and she said, well, Madison, the pendulum is really swinging. And for a long time, we were in a space of where the patriarchy was really reigning, and birth was very linear, and there were so many procedures around birth. And now it's kind of swinging into the opposite direction, where we're remembering what it feels like to birth at home, surrounded by sisters, surrounded by trusted loved ones and family members. And her mother was actually at the birth as well. And so she ended up free birthing with her mom in this space and her partner and myself, right? And so she just said, like, the pendulum is swinging and we're finding more balance. I'll never forget that.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I know has helped some families of mine who end up in the system, even if it's after, their kid has a fever or something. Have you heard of the BRAIN acronym?
I have heard of it.
Yeah, that one has
Yeah.
been really helpful. I have a son that is a frequent flyer to the hospital for medical issues, and that one I really, just solidified my use of that with him. And it's such a great one to just slow it down, bring it down. Let's not rush this, obviously, unless it's very clear that it needs to be rushed and it's an actual emergency. But sometimes if you can start with like, can we have this conversation? It gets really clear that it's not an actual emergency that you have to decide right now. And we do have time to talk about it. And so I think that is a great way to have your team pause so that you can reflect with them. So for anyone who doesn't know, the BRAIN acronym stands for benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition, and N is either need time or do nothing. But it can be a good way to get your birth team who maybe feels like they're rushing you to like give a pause. And it'll be really clear if you're asking these questions, if there is no time to pause and it really is a true emergency. You just jump right to the end, like, can we have more time? And it'll be obvious if you can't. But yeah,
And it's very rare. Like, I've found it's really rare in birth that there's not enough time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes providers will make you feel like something is bound to go wrong. And when it does, it's going to be fast. And, we're going to need to do something right away. And like you were saying, most of the time that is not the case.
Birth is of course it can happen, like birth can happen really quickly, but there's usually enough time to have like 3, 4, 5, 10 breaths where you're wavering in and out, and you have time in between each sensation to kind of come back and ground down and make informed decisions. And yeah, that's why I think in my head it's just so critical to like have a birthing doula like in the space, or some sort of trusted attendant that you have a rapport with. otherwise you're working with strangers. Like everybody at the hospital coming into your birth space is probably a stranger. And even the one who's going to be there to catch the baby, unless if you push them away and get them out of the way, right? Like they're often strangers. So I do talk about that with my clients prenatally, like saying how they feel about having, at the moment of birth, your baby's going to start crowning, and then the pediatrician's going to walk in, and the charge nurse is going to walk in, and then if they have students, then their students are coming in with them. And so you might be laboring with maybe only one or two people in the room, but then as soon as the moment of birth happens, it's like a whole gang kind of comes in to just witness the experience.
You're on.
And I've gotten in trouble I've gotten in trouble. Yeah, right. Like what I did, like I tried to just close the birth space. It's like there were so many people there, and it's like it was too much. Like I'm like, what is happening here? There was like a solid 6 people that just walked in as she was crowning, and the OB was like screaming out like, oh, I think we have a potential shoulder dystocia here, probably a shoulder dystocia, like call the peds team. And all of a sudden these like flurry of people like come into the space, and I'm just like, I could see on the father's face, like the color really drained from his face, and he looked at me, and I could see he was like worried in that moment. And once it was determined that it wasn't a shoulder dystocia, the baby was about to shoot out, more people started to walk in. And I'm like, okay, we know it's not a shoulder dystocia, so why are there more people coming in? So I walked up to the curtain that sort of was like a divide between the hallway and the room, and I just like shut the curtain and shut the door, and I shut the curtain, and the charge nurse gave me a funny look. And then after the birth, she said, like, what was that? Why did you do that? That we didn't appreciate that. We have to keep the door open for safety reasons. And I'm like, because there was like 15 people in the room that didn't need to be there, and that is not what my client wanted.
Yeah, and if you need 15 people to handle an emergency, you probably need more training, because you don't need that many people.
Yeah. So, and it's so hard, like being in that position, and that's why I started to feel into just, okay, I'm only going to attend home births because I can't even fight this giant beast in the hospital anymore. Like they look at me and they just roll their eyes, they just don't even take me and my role seriously. And I just feel bulldozed by them usually by the end of it.
Yeah. So you don't do hospital birth anymore. Can you tell the listeners what your services are in case somebody is near you?
Yeah. So if you're looking for birth as a ceremony, I would say that I would be your birth keeper. Absolutely. If you're wanting to work with registered midwives, I'm happy to hold space for that as well. And then if you're wanting to birth in the hospital, our consultation will be probably a lot longer, because I want to understand, have the conversation that we were talking about, like what is it that's wanting you to be in the hospital. And then I usually try to open the door in their perspective around home birth and hospital birth, or sorry, home birth and physiological birth. So yeah, I like to have in-person consults. Honestly, I'd love to go to your home and see where you want to birth your baby and talk about that. And but I service all throughout the lower mainland. So for anyone that's in my area, it's like near Chilliwack all the way down into North Vancouver. So, and I now have a team of other birth attendants who are helping me because my business is getting really busy now.
Okay,
so it's awesome. We're well supported.
And how can they find you? What is your contact info?
They can find me through my website at www.odetobirth.com. And then my Instagram is at ode to birth. So that's ODETO birth. And they can contact me through the website. They can send me a direct message through Instagram. yeah, and then once I get an email from them or a text message sometimes will come through for inquiries, then we set up a consultation. And even if you're like 38 weeks pregnant and choosing all of a sudden you want to birth at home, that's totally fine too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had somebody once who had found us at 39 and gave birth probably, like 4 days later or something. And she's like, I wish I had found you earlier. I was like, but you didn't find us after birth. So she's like, yes, that's true.
It's pretty divine, hey, the way that the universe orchestrates it for us. Like I do find it's a soul connection, like definitely with most of my clients anyways. Like I do feel like, they were drawn to my services for a reason, and I was drawn to them for a reason to learn as a birth keeper and continue this journey as a student. Like I even in my crone years, like when I'm this old wrinkled up woman, like I still feel like I'll be learning from pregnant women and families and babies, and that's just how it is. It's a lifetime of service, and I do feel like it's a big mission of mine, and I think every birth keeper kind of feels that within them. Like you can't really get away from this work once you've been here, and especially home birth, and it's just magic.
Yeah. And if you think you're done learning, then you're not. Yeah. So if any providers make you feel like they have all the answers, they're lying to you. Yeah.
They don't know enough about birth then, in my opinion. They haven't seen birth they haven't seen raw birth. They haven't seen it, because if they think birth can go only one way and that's it, then they don't understand. They actually don't understand birth, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, because we're all so unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. And I will leave all your contact info in the show notes too, for anyone who's trying to reach out to you. And any last minute advice for someone who's listening and trying to find their way?
Yeah, I think birth is really an opportunity for you to step into your power and your sovereignty, and so to just really give yourself permission to express in any way that feels important to you and feels good for your heart. And another thing that I will say is I'm launching an online course very soon for those that are looking for home birth and trying to navigate how to find that balance between birth in the system and then birth at home. And it hasn't launched just yet, but I'm sure by the time this interview is up online, it will be available. And so you can find more information, like I said, through my Instagram. And then if you're curious about the course and you don't see it anywhere on any platform of mine, then just send an email.
Perfect. Well, great. Thank you again.
Yeah. And thank you, Born Wild. I love your guys' show. So happy to be here.
Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us at Born Wild Podcast on Instagram. For inquiries or feedback, you can email us at bornwildpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me, Emma Ray, on Instagram at Emma Ray, REA.
Sophia at sophiabirth.com. And me, Leah, at Bay Area Home Birth.
We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people. And as always,
Stay wild.